Today, I'll introduce moral intensity, a framework for understanding why some ethical issues demand more immediate attention than others. In business, our decisions are shaped not only by policies or personal values, but also by how serious, visible, and emotionally compelling an issue feels. The central idea is that the characteristics of a moral issue can influence how we recognize it, evaluate our options, and ultimately act. We'll examine how these dynamics affect ethical decision-making across different business environments. Moral intensity describes how strongly an ethical issue demands our attention. Introduced by Thomas Jones in 1991, the concept recognizes that ethical situations do not all feel equally urgent or significant. Some involve immediate, serious consequences, while others may seem minor or distant. In a business setting, moral intensity influences how carefully we notice an issue, deliberate about what is right, and decide whether to act. The central idea is simple. The higher the moral intensity, the stronger the likelihood of ethical action. This slide introduces Jones's framework for understanding moral intensity. Rather than treating an ethical issue as simply right or wrong, the framework looks at 6 distinct dimensions that influence how strongly the issue is experienced by a decision-maker. Together, these dimensions shape whether a situation feels urgent, serious, or deserving of careful moral attention. The key idea is that moral intensity is determined by the issue as a whole, not by any single characteristic in isolation. When evaluating the ethical weight of a decision, I focus on 3 connected components. First is magnitude, how much total harm or benefit could result. Laying off 500 employees, for example, carries more moral weight than a minor budget change. Second is probability, or how likely the harm is to occur. A known product defect is more concerning than a purely theoretical risk. Third is temporal immediacy, how soon consequences will appear. Imminent harm generally demands more urgent ethical attention than harm projected decades into the future. This slide introduces 3 factors that shape how we judge the ethical significance of an action. Social consensus refers to how widely people agree that something is right or wrong. Bribery is broadly condemned, while aggressive tax avoidance is more divisive. Proximity asks how socially, culturally, or physically close we are to the people affected, since closeness often increases our sense of responsibility. Finally, concentration of effect considers whether harm falls heavily on a few people or is distributed as smaller impacts across many. These factors can strongly influence our moral reactions. This slide shows how moral intensity influences the decision process from beginning to end. First, we recognize that a situation has ethical significance. Then we evaluate the available options, considering their consequences and alignment with our values. That evaluation shapes our moral intent, or what we believe we should do, before ultimately guiding us to take action. Moral intensity acts as an amplifier at every stage. When the stakes feel higher, people are more likely to notice the ethical issue, think more deeply about it, and follow through on a values-aligned decision. These scenarios show how the perceived intensity of harm can shape business decisions. An environmental violation is high intensity because the damage may be large, immediate, and broadly recognized as wrong, creating strong pressure to act. Expense report padding is low intensity. The individual amounts are small, effects are dispersed, and detection may seem unlikely, so people often rationalize it. A data privacy breach falls in the moderate to high range because it can affect many people, feels personally close in a digital environment, and reflects growing agreement that data rights matter. Many corporate scandals do not begin with a dramatic act of wrongdoing. They often start with small decisions that seem easy to dismiss, like skipping a safety check, overlooking a minor conflict of interest, or approving a slightly misleading claim. The danger is cumulative. When these low-intensity choices repeat, they can normalize rationalization and gradually create a broader ethical failure. Understanding moral intensity helps managers recognize concerns while they are still manageable, rather than waiting until problematic behavior has become routine or systemic. The organizational implications are practical and interconnected. Training and awareness help employees recognize the 6 components of moral intensity, so they can assess ethical concerns accurately, even when an issue seems low salience. Policy design should then reinforce that judgment by highlighting consequences, the people affected, and relevant social norms. Finally, leadership modeling makes these expectations visible. When leaders openly discuss moral intensity, they signal that ethical scrutiny is part of everyday work, not something reserved only for major or highly publicized decisions. Together, these practices create a stronger, more consistent ethical culture. This slide distinguishes between two forces that shape ethical behavior. Moral intensity is situational. It depends on how serious an issue feels, how it is framed, and the surrounding culture or organization. Individual ethical orientation is more dispositional, reflecting values, upbringing, education, experience, and character. It tends to remain relatively stable, but it does not determine behavior by itself. Our personal ethics interact with how we perceive each situation. The most reliable path to ethical action combines strong individual principles with high awareness of the moral stakes. The key takeaway is that moral intensity is situational. 6 factors, including magnitude, probability, immediacy, and proximity, shape how urgent an ethical issue feels. Higher intensity encourages recognition, careful deliberation, and ethical action. Leaders and policies can also strengthen that perception, helping prevent failures before they become crises.